For Sunday, November 11th, you've found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, the governor's race for now is in legal limbo. We may have recounts in several Georgia races, and the Gulch in downtown Atlanta is a go. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
What a week in Georgia politics. What a long night Tuesday night. We will let the Georgia Gang's Lori Geary get us started.
Well, Dick, so the question is the governor's race over? That depends on who you ask. Stacey Abrams' camp says you can't declare victory when there are still votes to count. Republican Brian Kemp says yes, you can when you look at the math.
I'm here today to welcome the newly governor-elect.
Although there are still thousands of votes yet to be counted from Tuesday's election, Republican Brian Kemp says he's moving forward with his transition to governor.
I'm stepping down as Secretary of State.
2 days after the election, Kemp resigned from office, a move many Democrats called for months ago since he was overseeing his own election.
Press releases do not declare victory.
The Abrams camp said not so fast, assembling a legal team that may mount court challenges over Tuesday's result. They say every hour the results get closer because new votes are being counted. They are looking at the numbers closely and say if more than 23,000 additional votes go Abrams' way, Georgia state law requires a runoff.
25,000 votes of nearly 4 million cast are at issue in this race. By his own admission, there are at least 25,000 outstanding votes and hundreds, if not thousands, of more that we are learning about and discovering every day.
The only thing outstanding is about a little over 20,000 provisional ballots. Even if she got 100% of those votes, we still win. The votes are not there for her. I certainly respect the hard-fought race that she ran.
Now, the results are expected to be certified by the new interim Secretary of State, former Department of Human Resources Commissioner Robin Crittenden. Dick.
Lori, where are we? I mean, I guess at the end of Friday, we had all the ballots, provisional ballots were supposed to be accounted for. In other words, people who were designated as a provisional ballot. And then by Tuesday, all the results certified. I am inclined to agree, Lori, with Brian Kemp. I don't see the numbers for Stacey Abrams.
I don't see them either. I don't think the math is there for Stacey Abrams. However, I did listen to that entire news conference that the Kemp campaign had. And they said, you know, as of 2 days ago, there were 236 Cobb County votes that came in that were not counted. So I don't think that they can find thousands that were not counted, and that's going to be the difference.
Theron, do you agree with that?
Well, I think Lori's right. I mean, during the press conference from Stacey Abrams' campaign manager and now her legal team that she's assembled, right when they were getting ready to come out, they saw that some new provisional ballots sort of, appear. But the thing that's really interesting is that the big winner here is the Georgia voters, because we had almost 4 million people vote. I mean, that's significant. But the thing that also the Abrams campaign was saying is that if folks voted provisional, it was left up to you by 5 o'clock on Friday to go to your county clerk's office to provide the necessary identification to make sure that your provisional ballot was certified. So I think that was a big push for the Abrams campaign as well.
And Phil, to you, I have been, my inbox, now the election's over, is easy to navigate now, thank goodness. But it seems to me that every lawyer in the state of Georgia with a left-wing orientation is either suing or threatening to sue.
Well, that's right.
And talking about votes that I just don't think exist.
Well, that's right. I agree. I think Stacey Abrams and her lawyers are just waging a war against arithmetic. I think that the math is not there. I agree with both of you, and I think you kind of know that too, Theron. But I think it was 64,000 votes. That really isn't going to change. He led by 1.6%, just to refresh the viewers. And I think he needs to go ahead. It's going to be certified, and he needs to start thinking about redecorating the governor's mansion.
Well, I also think that what Stacey Abrams is standing on principle as well as vote counts, that everybody who voted should get their vote counted and get their vote recognized. And so that's as important as anything. And even if she doesn't win, she still has
See,
fought
you're
for
such an optimist on that.
Yeah.
I think that everything she's done is to undermine the voting process.
No,
and the polls
absolutely
show
opposite.
that people on both sides are now concerned that the voting process is not legitimate.
Well,
You're making a good point there. Let me just point this out, Alexis, and think about the case of two concessions. Stacey Abrams, of course, didn't concede, and she has a right to do what she's doing. But in the Karen Handel, Lucy McBath congressional race, it was about, what, 4,000 votes?
3,000
or 4,000. Karen Handel said, good luck to Representative-elect McBath.
Because she wanted out.
But she could have done, my point is, this was graceful. She could have done what Stacey Abrams lawyered up with Republican lawyers
like
and dragged it out.
Did in the city
I think I don't like any candidate doing that if the math is against them. This is Dick, to your point, it's a propaganda campaign. Abrams is already emailing to raise money. And it's just a resistance against what happened at the ballot box.
But look at how close the race was. It still is.
The math is not there. 64,000 votes.
But still, people need to have their votes counted. She promised people to vote for her.
All the provisional ballots are going to be taken care of.
Well, let's make sure.
Let's presume that Brian Kemp won, and that he is the new governor, and of course he's putting a transition team in place and so forth. Let's assume all that. So what? I'd like to get a feel from each of you about what the overarching lesson of this election was. I'm concerned, from my point of view, that Abrams has spent so much time about so-called voter suppression that I think people's faith in the ballot box is challenged. And then there are other things. The Democrats did a beautiful job of using so-called pre-existing conditions as a campaign tool. It affected so many races all the way down the ballot. And for the Republican side, Phil, and I'll start with you, it looks like the rural vote is lock solid.
Well, I think we would all agree it was a tale of victories by both parties, and it was a tale of two elections. Atlanta is now a Democratic city. That was made very clear. And outside of Atlanta is basically Republican territory. And again, Brian Kemp's strategy was perfect. The rural vote brought him in. I think messaging, and Theron and I talked about this Tuesday night. We analyzed the messaging and the tactics of both parties, and there was pros and cons. I would say to my Republican friends, and I said this on the broadcast last week, they should have done a lot more explaining their health care reforms, which was good. I won't go into that and take time, and other table issues, breakfast table issues. But I think that Dick, to your point, I think this does undermine our democratic system when you have people refusing to accept the results of an election. Elections, you win some and you lose some. Abrams lost. Get over it.
Lori, to you,
Yes.
The other thing besides health care by the Democrats, suburban women abandoned the Republican ticket in droves, causing all kinds of damage, again, all the way down the ticket.
And I think if you look at the map, right, it's two Georgias. You have the urban areas that are blue now, and then you have rural Georgia. And I think Republicans have to figure out by 2020 how to get those women back, because it is a majority of the female vote. Democrats, on the other hand, they've got to get a message out to rural voters. Stacey Abrams did a good job of trying on health care, thinking that that was the issue that could get them around because of all of these rural hospitals closing. But in the end, it didn't work.
What do you think, Alexis?
I'm sort of agreeing, except I think it did work, and that I'm really reminded of what Jeff Dickerson said on this show, the last 2014 campaign. He says it's going to be 2020 before the demographics change enough for a Democratic candidate to win statewide. And I think that's probably what it is. It's as much as demographics as it is policy.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I get it. There's no arguing there. I think the Republicans are fighting
I also think
a demographic tie.
As women
yes
become,
and no. Yes and no. If you're bringing in more, let's say, whites, for example, with high-paying IT jobs or other jobs, I didn't see the African-American registration go up that much. I think the battle might be for other minorities, Asian Americans, Indian Americans. I think both parties have those votes up for grabs, and to bring back suburban white women.
I think
we got to get out.
We're all just go Democratic.
We got to get out. I just want to observe quickly. The Washington Post had a front page story calling us a secondary city. Just throw that out for you. Here we are talking about the Atlanta vote and the Georgia vote. We're the largest state east of the Mississippi, and the Washington Post said that people are moving to Atlanta and Nashville and Charlotte and called us secondary cities. Just wanted to get that out there.
That was fake news.
But of course. All right.
Goodness gracious.
When we come back, a whole lot more on the ballot. We've just touched it. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
And continuing on the governor's race and the monumental elections on Tuesday, we posited for you that the women vote was vital, that health care was a vital issue. Theron, other ideas in this race that propelled Abrams to almost a runoff?
Well, I think Lori touched on this a little bit earlier, is that I think that while the demographics haven't changed at a point where Democrats want them to be, I think a lot of hearts change. You know, if you looked at how Lucy McBath and Stacey Abrams and really the entire Democratic ticket was able to convert some of these college-educated suburban white women, but also if you look at the margin that Stacey Abrams was able to get in some of these rural counties that traditionally were Republican strongholds, you don't make up this 250,000 vote gap that we've seen from the last two gubernatorial elections without having a metro and rural strategy. The other thing that I think that really we saw is that while Republicans did do better than they've done historically in the early vote, it all came down to Election Day. And I think that Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp's campaign really turned out their voters. I mean, we had a 61% turnout in 2018 versus a 40% turnout amongst all voters that we had in 2014. So again, I think it was the ground operations of both campaigns, but we now live in a purple state. And I wanted to say something else, that I think that we got to make sure that democracy prevails. Is that you know, we didn't hear this criticism that we're hearing now when other people in local mayoral races and congressional races were taking their time 2 or 3 days to make sure that the votes were counted properly. So I think we need to sort of decrease a little bit of the attacks on the democracy and making sure that every vote counts.
All right, the rest of the ticket kind of followed the governor's race. Jeff Duncan was chosen as lieutenant governor by about 2-3%. It was that way all up and down the ballot. Ironically, the leading vote getter on the Republican side was Richard Wood, the education secretary. That's fascinating to me. Gary Black, the agriculture commissioner, did well. Lori, we have 2 runoffs. Statewide runoffs. Who votes in those? Who's got the energy left?
December 4th. It's the Secretary of State's race, which was really close. Republican Brad Raffensperger against former Congressman John Barrow. So that will be a really good matchup. We saw John Barrow had a really catchy ad over the campaign. He's like, I'm a Democrat, but I won't bite ya.
Yep.
And I think that really rang true with voters. And then also the PSE Commission race between Chuck Eaton and Lindy Miller.
And Lindy Miller was a promising candidate. Raised a lot of money, looked good on television. But, you know, Plant Vogel, a lot of issues there. But I just wonder who's going to bother to vote in that thing.
It's December 4th. So there's going to be a lot more mailers and campaigning. It's not over yet.
And one quick thing, Ted Metz, who we talked a lot about, who we thought was going to get a few more votes in the governor's race. The 2 libertarians, I think, and definitely in the Secretary of State's race and
sure did.
In the PSE race, got more votes than Ted Metz did. And so they had a sort of great deal of influence of those 2 races going to a runoff.
All right, let's turn to the 2 marquee races for Congress, the only 2 that were really contested. Clearly an upset in the 6th District, which is Buckhead North up through Fulton County, where Karen Handel only served 1 year. For all of that with John Ossoff a year ago, she only served 1 year. And Lucy McBath, a carpetbagger, whose residence is not clear.
Stop.
It just isn't clear. Lucy McBath is elected to Congress
Certainly
from the 6th
Karen's
District.
residency was clear, Fulton County, and not Cobb.
Well, yeah, that's, but
I understand what you're saying.
But I thought Karen, Phil, I think you mentioned this just a minute ago. I thought Karen Handel at least conceded graciously and didn't prolong the agony. She lost by, what, about 3,000 votes?
That's right. And that did show the hemorrhaging, as we're talking about, of, I think, some Republican women. And there have been some minority growth.
I have to tease you, Steve. Steve Martin.
She calls me Steve Martin.
I have to tease you because you kept talking about the women taking gun lessons and shooting
That's
lessons.
right.
The women were concerned about their children's safety. That's what they were concerned about.
Well, you know, I think it's a mixed bag around the state because Rob Woodall, the other Republican congressman that was challenged by a liberal gun grabber, thank goodness for Forsyth County. That is now the big Republican county. There's been a shift. Yes, Gwinnett went Democrat.
And Cherokee,
yes,
too.
Cobb went Democrat, but there's 2 replacements there. Cherokee County is doing well with the Republicans, and Forsyth County, I remember election night, Theron, when Forsyth came in, and it was 43,000 pop, just like that, and it put Rob Woodall over.
So Karen Bordeaux actually won the race before she lost it. They actually called it for her, and then, you know, it's still votes being counted as we see here. But let's not overshadow this amazing campaign that Lucy Metcalf ran. I mean, let's not.
Well, sure. If you get millions of dollars from Michael Bloomberg and George Soros and the hard left nationally, you're going to do well just by showing up.
So I hope you.
Well, John Ossoff did that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And it didn't do well for him.
This theme I'm trying to develop about carpetbaggers.
So I'm going to take
with
back my
outside
time
money.
because you took it away from me. So I'm going to take back my time.
Take back
So
your
what I'm
time.
saying is that
This isn't the General Assembly, by the way.
well, I may run one day. You never know. But my point is that for a lot on this show is that, you know, we didn't really talk about the ground game that Lucy Metcalf had. We never talked about how she had a campaign that really, I think, brought a lot of humanization to it. She really tapped into the emotions of voters in that district. And then lastly, you know, we tried to make her this one-trick pony. And she talked about issues like gun safety and gun control, but health care. She talked about education.
Pre-existing conditions.
But to take out an incumbent anywhere, in a conservative district that has been a Republican stronghold that Tom Price and I think even Newt Gingrich and others represented for so many decades, for a Democratic woman to win, that's a huge boost.
It does prove, though, Dick is right, a lot of money was poured in by these left-wing groups. You can't deny that. Around the country, the Republicans, and I blame Paul Ryan and the Republican leadership, they did not match, Dick, the funding of the hard left and George Soros.
And Karen Handel told me that she was collateral damage to A, Brian Kemp's rural strategy, no money coming into the metro, B, the Republican mistake in Washington of not distributing the money in a more equitable fashion. So we got to get out.
And add the fact that they spent $30 million, the largest race in history, when she won the last time.
Right. In other words, she was damaged to start with. Is that what you're saying?
No, she got all the money last year.
She got all the money she could get. They weren't giving her anymore.
I did love that Beto O'Rourke over in Texas blew.
John Francis O'Rourke.
John Francis O'Rourke, the Democrat, was beaten by Rafael Cruz, if you want to use the real names. But $70 million was blown. I love it. At least the left wasted all that
All right,
money.
we got to get out. There's so much more we've got to talk about. The down ballot thing that I keep mentioning. Got to talk about that. But when we return, I think we do have to talk about the Gulch. It's the biggest thing in downtown Atlanta in many years. Stay with us.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Okay, moderator's executive decision. We're going to talk about 3 major local news stories that aren't politically related, and then we'll come back and try to talk about the rest of the election news, which I think is substantial. Let's start in downtown Atlanta, where Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms finally got the city council to agree to her proposal for the major redevelopment of the Gulch, a $5 billion project. The Gulch is now just kind of parking and pigeons. And the council voted 8-6 to support that plan. And Theron, I noticed that there's one little wrinkle. The school board, which collects most of our taxes, by the way, isn't going along with it.
Yeah, I mean, big win for the mayor, big win for the council members who supported this, and it was a long process. And I think that if you look at the sort of tone of the mayor's remarks at almost midnight when the vote passed, she was very gracious in thanking the council members and basically said, look, you know, this is a lesson learned. Let's continue to try to work together as we move forward. Now you move to, she also had a big win with getting Invest Atlanta to improve, I think, roughly about $45 million towards the $1.5 billion is going to be needed in bonds bonds. There is some need for some more productive conversations to be had between the city of Atlanta and the Atlanta Public Schools. And I employ, Jason Estevez, the chair, to really get involved in this, because right now it's sort of been a lot of opposition from the superintendent, who rightly so has put up some opposition. But I think that the mayor will make every attempt she can to try to move forward. But the way the deal currently stands is that they do not have to get the approval from APS. And then lastly is this: I think that the mayor also pointed out that APS possibly left about $240 million on the table that could have gone towards children in the Atlanta public school system because of the refusal to work with the city in the Gulch deal.
Anybody oppose this thing?
There were a lot of folks in Buckhead that opposed this because they really are focused on crime in Buckhead and the wave of crime that's been happening. And their message was that, and there's like 5,000 strong in this one group that I follow on Facebook, is that you need to fix your problems that you have right now before you go approving some, $1.7 billion deal that's ultimately going to be $5 billion. You've got infrastructure problems and road problems. And those were the folks I saw that came out strongest against the Gulch.
Lori's making a good point there. And also a second point, and it was a close vote on city council, and Councilman flipped. I think with the big money involved, taxpayer money, I don't know if there's going to be the benefit to the taxpayers. That was the main argument of the opponents on the city council.
I'm with Andy Young on this. There's no money there now.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is all good to have the development of the Gulch area.
And I think also you really have to give credit where credit's due to Mayor Bottoms. I'll agree with Theron on that, because we weren't even sure she had the votes going into the council meeting. And she did the pay increase for the officers. It was a 30% pay increase. So there was a lot of give and take here, and ultimately it was a big win for her.
There was. It was smart for the opposing city council members to say, stop, wait, we're not getting all the information. Bottoms was blocked several times from getting this, trying to ram it through. And so they got concessions, and that was smart by the opponents.
On a last note, not so positive, Mitzi Bickers, former aide to Kasim Reed, pleaded not guilty on her 12th indictment on this one on attempted bribery in Jackson, Mississippi. I guess that's the good news. It wasn't in Atlanta. But I think now that the election's over, we're going to see a lot more about the ongoing corruption stuff in the city of Atlanta, and we still haven't heard really from the U.S. Attorney
Predictions,
on that.
More indictments coming.
That could have been a prediction every week for the last 3 years.
And it's going to keep coming.
That's pretty bold.
All right, we got to get out. We didn't get down the ballot, darn it. But you know what? We're here 52 weeks a year, so stay with us. When we return, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And we will do that now, and I think I will start with Phil.
Okay. Well, I've got to talk about the Georgia Bulldogs, and they're going into the SEC championship, so go Dogs. And I know you joined me in that, Theron, as a good Bulldog. And then secondly, today is Veterans Day, and I want to salute all of the veterans out there, and I hope we pause and have an observance of the sacrifice. And I think both parties, actually, you could claim, were winners in various areas. And in Atlanta, the Democrats triumphed, and around the state, the rural strategy of Brian Kemp and other Republicans prevailed.
All right, Lori, how about you?
I think the winner, besides all of the winners in the election day, Robin Crittenden. She is the interim Secretary of State. She's got a tough job ahead, but she was a great pick by Governor Nathan Deal. She ran the Department of Human Services for 3 years, did a great job over there. My loser, as a Catholic, it's tough to say this, but the Archdiocese of Atlanta. They're coming forward now with these accusations of the sexual molestation of children, and there was only a handful of
15
priests on this, and I think there's a lot more to come. A city this size, I think that we're going to be hearing a lot more about that.
Except there weren't many Catholics 30 years ago. It's a tough question. All right, but at least the Archdiocese and Bishop Gregory came clean. That's what he has now. We hope that's all.
They have a website to report, if you were a victim.
You got it. Alexis.
I'm going to salute Ntozake Shange. She died this past week. She wrote the choreo poem play called For Colored Girls Who've Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough, which gave a big voice to black women
Longest play title in history, yeah.
Yes, okay. But it also gave insight and a platform for black women to speak. and their truth to power. Also, she was a classmate of mine.
Oh.
And then finally, I want to a personal privilege and tell my mother happy birthday. She turned 95 this week, and we had a lovely celebration for her. Happy
Good for
birthday,
her.
Mommy.
Darren, what you got?
All right, a few winners.
We did your mom's birthday. Didn't we do that just a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, I did. And I made a mistake and mentioned her age, and she still hasn't forgiven me.
It's my daughter's birthday, so say happy
go
birthday
ahead.
to
Oh,
her.
that's right.
Yeah,
My
so-
son, too. But I won't tell his age.
Eagles Landing, we didn't get a chance to talk about that,
Right.
but big shout out to the voters there who voted against the de-annexation plan. I think it was 57-43. Huge shout out to Minority Leader Bob Trammell and Senate Minority Leader Steve Henson. Democrats were able to pick up 11 seats in the House, 2 seats in the Senate, and also want to make a winner. And I agree with Phil. I think at the end of the day, 4 million voters turned out roughly to vote. And I think that ultimately Republicans had some good things, some good gains across the state, but Democrats did as well. So I definitely want to make both parties and all the campaign workers who've spent countless amount of hours and days and sacrifice of sleep, all the hard work that they've gave to all the campaigns.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't get to this, but I think my losers are those basically inside I-285 Republicans who tended to be more moderate to conservative, who lost. For example, there is no longer a Republican in the DeKalb County delegation. That means Vernon Jones rules, and Michael Thurman, of course. But very strange sort of a situation there. My state senator, Fran Miller, lost, one of the most accomplished lawmakers at the Capitol. But again, they were sort of collateral damage too to the anti-Trump sentiment. So we're out of time here. Just remember that the Falcons, 1 o'clock here on Fox against the hapless Cleveland Browns.
Oh, gosh.
And, well, tune in anyway because we need a victory. See you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.